Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a Q&A episode. I have three questions I want to dive into, but first, before I do that, I just want to go over a few ways you can help support the podcast. So first, if you found this podcast to be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, and that will help more people find this podcast. I think it's pretty easy on Spotify to do it. Apple's a little bit more challenging, but either way, if you could, that would be super helpful. And again, that will help more people find this information. And again, I appreciate everybody who listens. Next, I have my free masterclass on body recomp, what it is, how to do it. Basically, you'll know everything about body recomp when you're finished. The link to that is in the show notes. I also have my free masterclass on nutrition periodization. Again, what it is, how to do it, go through each phase, how to set it up, common mistakes, adjustments, etc. Again, the link to that is in the show notes. Lastly, if you haven't yet, give me a follow on Instagram, Jeff, HOEHN_. That's where I'm most active on social media. So if you have any questions or you want to consume more content, that's definitely the place to find me. And also, again, if you are listening to this and something I say doesn't make sense, or again, you don't think it's true, then you can always reach out and we can chat about it in more details on there. So with that out of the way, let's dive into today's topic. So my first one is thoughts on protein sparing modified fasts. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to also hit on calorie cycling. So protein sparing modified fast. So basically what is it? So it's essentially it's a very low calorie diet where it's basically just protein, right? You may have a little bit of like carbohydrates and fats, but it's essentially just protein. Okay. And so this could be something that you can use within a fat loss phase to help you mitigate, to help with being in a calorie deficit, and again, help mitigate the protein side, the muscle loss, because you're getting in enough protein, right? I think there are some people who will do this for a couple weeks at a time, but this would be something that I wouldn't recommend to most people. And again, we would need to make sure that you are having some guidance with this. And I wouldn't do this as like a full on, this is how I'm doing my entire diet, right? Like this would probably be something where we would throw in maybe a couple days out of the week or something along those lines. So it wouldn't be something where it's like, hey, we're going to do this for 3, 4, 5 weeks, because again, it is a very low calorie diet. Again, you could do it for a week or two, but anytime you do these really low calories, you can't do it for extended period of time. One of the main things is obviously you're going to be super hungry, right? Now, obviously eating more protein can help with managing hunger, but you're still going to be super hungry with that. The big thing is going to be the nutrient deficiencies, right? Again, you're going to be missing out on essential vitamins and minerals, most likely, right? And you would also want to pay attention to things like electrolytes, sodium, potassium, magnesium there with that. Again, I wouldn't do this on your own. I wouldn't do this if you are somebody who doesn't have guidance, or you haven't had multiple successful fat loss phases under your belt. I definitely would not do this. And again, remember, this is not something that you would want to do for extended periods of time. And ideally, and in most situations, if I'm going to implement this, which I rarely implement this, unless a client really wants to do it, or again, they have the skill, you would want to do this for very short term, right? So again, days, or very short in terms of a couple weeks there with that. You obviously want to weight train during it if you're doing this. Now, again, if we're doing this a couple days out of the week, then this would be something where I would try to do this on an off day from weight training. And then maybe you're doing some like light movement in forms of walking. And again, we wouldn't want to also combine this with like really high volumes of training, because we're not, bringing in a ton of meals, or because we're not bringing in a ton of calories during this period of time. And again, we want it to be high protein, low fat, and like low carb foods, right? So an example of this would be like a grilled chicken salad, steamed fish with green vegetables, a grilled chicken salad, right? Without a ton of dressing, maybe no dressing at all. Again, or chicken with broccoli, right? You could do steamed fish with green vegetables, or you could do like a egg white omelet with spinach, right? So those are some options of meals that you would base it around there with that. So is there any special benefit to doing a protein sparing modified fast diet? And no, there's not. It's just a way to bring down your overall caloric intake. And again, we're doing this to make sure your protein stays normal, right? There's no benefit other than it is a way to, if that's all you eat, you're going to be in a deficit. What I want to do now is switch over to the kind of concept of like calorie cycling, because that's essentially what this is, right? Again, there's no magic benefit to it other than the benefit is that you are getting in plenty of protein while being very low calorie, right? We're probably talking anywhere from 500 to 1,000 calories per day. And again, you probably want to keep your protein somewhere around 1 gram per pound of body weight, right? You're automatically looking at, again, 500 to 1,000 calories. Again, very low calories. Like I said, this isn't something you would want to do. I wouldn't do it straight through for multiple weeks. You could, but again, you would want to do that for very short term. This would be something where I would, again, just have somebody do it 1 or 2 days out of the week and maybe every other week or something like that. And so again, now I want to switch gears to the concept of calorie cycling, because that's essentially what this is. It's calorie cycling. What is calorie cycling? Again, your weekly average caloric intake is going to have a larger role on fat loss or muscle gain than what you do in one single day. Okay. Because of this, it allows for some flexibility from day to day. So instead of hitting the same amount of calories per day, you can have some days that are higher and then some days that are lower, so long as your average calorie intake for the week is where you want it to be. So again, you could have some days that are a little bit higher and then some days where you're a little bit lower. So in this specific example, with the protein sparing modified fast, you have these days where, let's say you want your average for the week to be, and I'll give some exact numbers. I'm just throwing these ones out. You may have some days where you have 2 days where you're at 500 to 1,000 calories, all protein, and then the rest of the week, maybe you're at 2,500. And that gets you an average of, say, I don't know what that is off the top of my head. Again, I'm going to give you exact numbers here in a minute. But let's say that average is 2,000 calories a week, right? And that's enough for you to be in a calorie deficit for the week. Again, that is something you can do. Hey, you get 2,500 calories the rest of the week, which is not bad, right? Again, these numbers are going to be variable from person to person. Now, in saying this, there are some pros and cons to this approach, and depending on what your current goal is, whether it's fat loss, muscle gain, or maintenance, it may affect if it's a viable strategy for you. What I will say on this is a protein sparing modified fast would not be something that I would say is going to be conducive to, like, if your goal is to maximize muscle growth. What I will say on this is I do think there might be a benefit if, like, you're in a surplus for months on end to have 1 or 2 days a month where you maybe do something like this just to give your body a break from all the calories. But this would not be like a cornerstone thing of, hey, you need to do this to build muscle, right? So again, all right, so here's some exact numbers here. So if you want to hit 2,000 calories per day, but you want one day to be 2,500, you could do something where 6 times a week it's 1,900, and then one time a week it's 2,500, right? That's going to be a 2,000 calorie average for the week. You could also do 5 high, 2 low, or 2 low, 5 high, 4 high, 3 low. Again, just realize the higher your calories are in one day, the lower they will be on others. But again, and vice versa. So there's many different ways that we could go about this. Now, the big thing though is you just don't want your calories to get too high on any one single day, because that can throw everything off. And I think the larger your surplus is in one day, it's probably not the greatest from a muscle building, or sorry, a body composition standpoint there with that. So on the low days, again, you would take away carbs or fats, but usually carbs, and then protein stays the same throughout the week. So again, in this protein sparing modified fast example, this would just be like an extreme example of calorie cycling, right? I do mention with calorie cycling, I do like to avoid large variability from one day to the next. But I think the big thing is we just don't want it to be super high one day, right? Because I think that's not great from a body composition standpoint, like I said. But again, if we want to implement this protein sparing modified fast, this is how we would do it with that. So again, some pros of doing calorie cycling, protein sparing, modified fast. It gives you more flexibility. If you have an event come up or like to have a little more food on certain days of the week, you can increase your calories on those days. So again, so long as your overall caloric intake for the week is in the range you want it. It can help with training, right? You can eat more food on days where you have tougher workouts. So if you do these 1 or 2 days of a protein sparing modified fast, you place them on your off days, and now you maybe have more energy on your workout days. You have more food, which can help your training, right? Again, it helps you realize, it helps you take the big picture approach, right? With it, there's that. Now, this approach does come with some cons. Like I said, to state, this is not something that I recommend to clients where I'm like, oh, hey, this is a cornerstone of my fat loss phase, right? This is, again, you need to be advanced. You need to be somebody who has multiple fat loss phases under your belt to make this work. And ideally, you would have some guidance on it. But again, like I said, there's some cons. If you go too low on certain days, it could be really hard to manage the hunger on those days, right? What's your response a day after a protein sparing modified fast day where you're 500 to 1,000 calories? You could be super hungry, and it could be really hard to stick to your calorie goals for the rest of the week. So again, we need to look out for that. And again, it can lead to a binge kind of restrict mindset with food. So that's, again, this is where like having somebody that having some guidance on this can be super helpful. And again, from a protein sparing modified fast standpoint, again, it is a form of calorie cycling. Again, that would be something I would do in a fat loss phase, but very rarely. But again, it's something you can do. So hopefully this gives you some more insight on how to manage that. And there with that, where I want to finish this up here is calorie cycling for fat loss, calorie cycling for muscle gain, and calorie cycling for maintenance. So again, for fat loss, you can have some higher calorie days on tougher workout days, or when you have events come up that will be tough to stick to your normal calorie amount. Again, just pay attention to hunger on low days and days following higher, lower days. And again, we want to make sure protein doesn't fall too low on those low days. But if we're doing a protein sparing modified fast, we don't have to worry about that. So what about the concept of calorie cycling for muscle gain? Again, you could place more food on days where you have more intense workouts or workouts that use muscle groups you want to prioritize. Again, just look out for going like too low because we don't want to be in too big of a deficit on any one day. Even though what we do throughout the entire week is the most important, we probably want to limit how often we're in a deficit there with that. And if we're doing that for 1 to 2 days out of the week, it's again, from a maximizing muscle growth standpoint, is that the best, who knows, but probably not. And again, we don't want to go lower than your maintenance calories when building muscle is a goal there on that. And then calorie cycling during a maintenance phase. Again, this can be a great strategy during your maintenance phases. Again, the same rules apply here, though. Avoid large variability from your low to high day. Don't let protein fall too far on the low days. And again, pay attention to hunger on low days and days following low days. So again, the only time I would really use a protein sparing modified fast would be in a fat loss phase. I guess you could theoretically do it in a maintenance phase if you wanted to, maintenance/health phase. Again, it just comes down to you and your specific needs there with that. But again, the time that I would really use it would be in a fat loss phase there with that. Again, no magic to protein sparing modified fast other than it's a way to manage your overall caloric intake for the week. And I had this conversation with Brandon DeCruz on my podcast a couple months ago. And if you're somebody who maybe just you get tired of eating regularly, it can be a way to dial back your food intake for one day out of the week or two. And that can be super helpful, especially if you're busy and you have a lot going on there with that. So cool. All right. So next question is going to be reverse to my estimated TDEE, which TDEE is your total daily energy expenditure, right? So that's how many calories you burn throughout the day. Again, so they reversed from a fat loss phase to their estimated one, right? They probably put something in an online calculator, got to their estimated, but they're still losing weight. They're underweight and want to gain muscle long term. First, this is why I say that when you get these estimated total daily energy expenditure numbers, it's just your estimated total daily energy expenditure. It's not, hey, this is exactly what it is. So again, you need to take these with a grain of salt. And I'm going to go over why these calculators don't always work for you. But if you're still dropping weight, you're in a calorie deficit. You need to increase your calories. So again, maybe let's just throw out a number, 2,300 is your estimated, whatever reason. That is still a deficit. That could be because maybe your movement's super high. If you're moving more than like 12 to 15K steps per day, you could also decrease that as well too. But either way, if you're seeing your weight trend down still, you're still in a calorie deficit. One thing that could happen here too is some people's bodies will adapt to higher caloric intake. Their body just becomes more wasteful with the energy you give it. So it's a little bit harder for them to get into a calorie surplus or to maintenance. Again, that's less likely to happen than the opposite, but that does happen. But again, I think the big thing here is if you're seeing your weight trend down, you need to increase your calories. One big mistake I see people make here when they reverse out of a fat loss phase into this, and then they're still seeing their weight trend down, is they're very ingrained, and especially for someone who's underweight and they've been underweight maybe their entire life, is they have these like fat loss, fitness kind of nutrition habits ingrained, right? Where they can only eat certain foods, they can only eat quote unquote clean foods, high volume foods. And so it can be really challenging to get in enough calories in this situation. So I also would wonder if part of it's your mindset and the mental side of thing that needs to be worked on here too, about, hey, you need to also increase your calories. You need to increase your food choices and change that up a little bit. For example, I have a client now. She is somebody that falls into this where she's in her late 40s, early 50s, and she lean and she's trying to build muscle. We wrapped up a fat loss phase and she's in a building phase now, and we're trying to get her to see her weight come up, but it's maintaining and it's gone down a little bit at the beginning. And for her, she just had those fat loss habits ingrained in her mind, and that's like what her baseline is, where it's like high food volume stuff. Hey, I gotta have quinoa and cauliflower rice over regular rice. But again, it's making those switches that we need to, right? Switching to more calorie dense foods. Again, maybe every once in a while doing more chicken thighs than chicken breasts, doing, instead of 98% lean ground beef, you're doing 90%, right? Small changes like that. Instead of skim milk, you're doing whole milk, stuff like that, making those small changes, adding in some peanut butter, adding in more olive oil, things like that. So there's the first thing. Again, if it's trending down, you're under your estimated maintenance. But I really want to briefly touch on why calorie and macro calculators don't always work for you. Again, they're great for getting you an idea, and they're great for getting you to your estimated total daily energy expenditure, but they aren't perfect. So the first reason why they don't work, our bodies are complex, and while these numbers can get you into the ballpark, there's more that goes into it, and sometimes they can be off. Here's some things that can influence how many calories you burn in a day. And these are things that your total daily energy expenditure may not always pick up on, right? Or the calculators, right? So first is your needs. So think things like fidgeting and subconscious movement. This is probably the one that gets increased the most when you increase your calories, right? Again, I talked about your body being more wasteful. This is probably one that goes up. So again, this is like blinking, fidgeting, talking, just spontaneous movement, right? Things that you aren't really thinking about. Sometimes you'll see that increase when you have higher calories, right? And sometimes people's bodies will adapt differently. Genetics, some people just might, again, the calculator is not going to know your genetics. So you may just have a higher total daily energy expenditure than what would be normal. That certainly happens. Muscle mass is going to play a big role. Some of these calculators do ask for your body fat percentage, but again, it's really hard to actually know what your body fat percentage is. So it's not taking that into consideration. Your hormones, right? This, again, that's going to impact your total daily energy expenditure. For example, lower testosterone could mean that your total daily energy expenditure is slightly lower, right? Or if it's a little bit higher, maybe that's higher than what you would think. Food quality is going to play a role in this, right? There is some research to show that more unprocessed food you may expend a little bit more energy from thermic effective food by eating that type of food versus processed food. Sleep's going to play a role. Stress levels, right? What you have done to your body in the past is going to impact how many calories, your total daily energy expenditure. And again, the calculator is not going to know that. Medications, again, your current energy balance. So, like I said, with the current energy balance, it's something where when you increase your calories, your body becomes more wasteful with the energy, right? So all these things are going to impact it there. So that's the first reason why we don't want to just overly focus on this. And then two, calorie counting is not precise, right? I love to use it for clients to bring awareness, but it isn't a perfect method. And there's going to be like, hey, you may think that you're tracking 2,300, but you could be tracking 2000, or on the opposite end, the other side is where most people fall. They think they're tracking 2000 or 1800, but really they're eating like 2500. But also on top of that, there can be up to a 20% margin of error, plus or minus what is said on the package in terms of calories. And tracking has a large skill component to it. And like any skill, it takes time to improve. And again, most people underreport how many calories they eat, but you could also overreport as well too. So to sum up the issues, a calorie calculator is a great starting point, but from there, you most likely have to make adjustments based on your results. If a calorie amount isn't working for you, it comes down to one, your TDE might be different from what the calculator says. Two, your tracking could be off. So what do I do with clients to make sure that they're on track there with that? We look at food logs. We work to improve tracking accuracy. We're going to look at your biofeedback, right? What's your digestion, hunger, cravings, energy, sleep, stress, training, performance, etc. And then we're going to monitor trends in body weight over time to see where those are going. All of these are going to impact if we increase, maintain, or decrease calories for them. Again, there have been multiple times where a client's calories are low on paper, but biofeedback is in a good spot. So that is their relative number, right? Even though they say they're tracking this amount. So same thing here in this situation. Okay, hey, so you are tracking 2,300, for example, but maybe you're actually eating 2,100. 2,300 is that baseline that we're going to go off of. So now we're going to increase to 2,500. So you increase your calories, and then now maybe you start to maintain your weight or gain a little bit of weight there in that process. But either way, this is why we don't want to put too much stock into these. Like, they get us in the ballpark, but from there we have to make adjustments and whatnot from there with that. So cool. So last question is more of a personal one. I think this one's super cool. So what are my training and nutrition goals currently? So what am I working on now? So for me, this has always been something that I've loved and I want to continue to do. And that's building muscle, right? I like the way it looks. I like the way I feel when I train for muscle growth, and looks are definitely the big one for sure. But so for me, it's continuing to do training that is focused on that. That's like the cornerstone of my training, right? Is this training that's going to lead to hypertrophy with that. So again, that's currently what I'm working on there. I'm not training, like there was a period of time in my life when I would train up to 6 days a week, lifting weights. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm at 4 right now. I was actually having this conversation with my coach the other day. I just feel businesses, there's a lot more going on. I have a lot more life responsibilities now than I did, say, 3, 5 years ago. And that mental stress does take a role, like, and it's not bad stress, it's good stress, but that it is a stressor on the body. And I do feel like that impacts my overall motivation to train. I definitely think the last 2 years have probably been the least the lowest motivation in terms of training. But again, I still really enjoy this type of training. And for me, it's more like an anchor to my day. And so I just know how I feel if I don't do it. And again, it's just, for me, it's a great habit to keep everything else in check, right? And obviously the added benefit is of adding muscle. So right now I'm doing 4 days a week of weight training, resistance training geared towards building muscle. Again, in that 5 to 15 rep range, 10 to 20 sets on everything, using cables, using some dumbbells. Don't really use too much barbell other than Romanian deadlift, but that's where I'm at from a training perspective, or that's one of my training goals right now. Just continue to add muscle. Now, I've been training consistently since I was 18, and I'm 33 now. So we're talking almost half of my life, 15 years. The amount of muscle that I'm going to grow is probably very small. Obviously, I'm still in this period of time in my life when I can still add muscle. So I still want to continue to do that. Now, ask me what my training is going to look like in 2 months when our baby's born, may be a little bit different, but I'm still going to weight train as much as I can. We're looking at adding some stuff at home so we can do things during that period of time. And I'll at least try to get in 2 to 3 times a week and then just try to maintain everything I can from that point. Staying injury free in the process is super important. Moderating my intensity, making sure I'm doing exercises that feel good for me is super important, right? Because I obviously want to stay injury free because if you're injured, you can't really train certain muscle groups very well. And really, it's all about if you can stay injury free, you can stay consistent, and that's how you really build muscle over time. It's all about how can we put together months, years of productive training. And again, one of the key things there is obviously keeping you adherent, keeping things somewhat motivating for you, especially in the beginning as you build that like habit of it. I feel like with where I'm at, I can get away with less motivation just because it's just kind of part of my life now. Again, that's not like me bragging or anything. It's just that this is what it is, right? But staying injury free is going to be key there with that. Next, and this is something that I've really focused on more in the last probably year and a half, is long-term health, right? So doing cardio. This was something that I neglected for a while. I actually, because I played hockey once a week regularly, I actually feel like I'm in decent cardio shape. Now, again, if you ask me to go run a marathon or half marathon, I would do absolutely terrible. But part of that's just because I suck at running, particularly. But I still, I don't have this amazing cardiovascular system, but or fitness, but it's definitely better. And this is important to me, right? Doing this cardio and it feels good. And again, it's super important that I maintain this and maybe see it trend up over time. Again, building muscle is still priority number one for me, but then cardio is right there. And building muscle is going to get the bulk of the training. That's like my main focus. And then cardio is going to come in second. Again, you have to understand that you're not going to be able to maximize each. Now, the thing with the cardio is I probably have a lot more room to build there for that, so I can get away with a little less and see progress. Whereas if I flip flopped it where I did 4 days of cardio, 2 days of weight training, I would be maintaining my muscle. Whereas the cardio right now, because of maybe where my base is at, I'm probably slowly gaining even on 2 days, right? But as I get better and better at it, that's going to slow down. And I would need to decide, all right, if I want to continue to improve my cardiovascular health, I would need to prioritize that a little bit more and do that a little bit more. Again, that could be the case at some point in the future. And basically, this just looks 2 days of zone 2, zone 3, lower intensity type training. And it looks like, 2 to 3 days of lower intensity training, or sorry, 2 days of zone 2, 3 lower intensity, and then 1 day of hockey on Sunday, which is a little bit higher intensity cardio there with that. And then, when the baby comes, I'm just going to try to get it in when I can. Hopefully we have some home equipment stuff that I can use, and that will help out there with that. And so as far as like nutrition goes, I'm going to right now, I'm just trying to keep my weight between 165 and 170. Kind of if I see it go up, I want it to be very slow, but I'm hanging around this 165, 166. And if I start to see it trend up, it's okay. I need to dial things back, but I don't track everything at the moment. I just don't want to. I don't feel like I need to. Make sure each meal is built around protein. I eat 3 to 4 times a day, mostly 4, and each meal is built around source of protein there with that. And other than that, I'm just monitoring my body weight and making sure it's not like trending up too quickly or trending down, right? Those are the main things there with that. And if I do see it go either way, I do make some adjustments in terms of what I eat there with that. So that's my current training and nutrition goals and what I'm working towards there. So hopefully that was helpful. That's it for this episode. I will chat with you next time.